Our story begins inside of the Jedi Temple as Jedi Master Tera Sinube was informed of the Jedi Squad, led by Mace Windu, going to arrest Chancellor Palpatine. And today, in this scenario, Master Sinube decides to act and help set the temple into a soft lockdown in case anything goes wrong with this arrest. And at this time, Sinube was in his older years and spent much of his time training the younger generations of Jedi. Today, he was with a group of Jedi Younglings, and before going to help the temple lockdown go into place, he had to send these Younglings somewhere safe. So, Sinube thought of the safest areas of the Jedi Temple, and ultimately, he gave them his key to enter the Jedi Council chambers. The Younglings, so full of hope and a touch of fear at Sinube's urgency, would listen to the Jedi Master. He told the children they will be safe, and he will be there to check in on them in no time. So, the Younglings, led by one of the older boys among the clan, called Sors Bandim, would head to the elevator together. And inside of the council chambers, currents of the Force were colliding around the troubled Anakin Skywalker like tidal waves. He was looking across the great city, out to where he knew Padme to be. Anakin could feel her standing, staring back at him across the stars, across the city and the sky. Their connection was so deep, so endless, and a tear rolled down Anakin's cheek as he knew what he must do. If Palpatine, Sidious, knows how to save her, then he has no choice. He can't live without her. So Anakin turned, but then the council doors opened. For a moment, Anakin wondered if it was Shaak Ti or another master sent to keep him here, but instead, Anakin just felt fear and confusion in the Force as the group of Younglings hurried into the chambers to find Anakin staring at them. The boy, Sors Bandim, looked up to Anakin and said, "Master Skywalker, it's good to see you. Will you stay with us? We're afraid." And this hit Anakin like a punch to the gut. In these children, Anakin saw himself, 10 years old, afraid, alone, in need of a Jedi to just tell him that he was safe, that he was loved. He saw Ahsoka, a young Jedi thrown into a war, Anakin as her only guide to keep her safe and grounded. Seeing these children, these innocent Jedi who played no part in the war, grounded Anakin back into the reality of his situation. He was so frustrated and angry with the Jedi Council that he failed to realize that most of the Jedi Order were just innocent beings thrown into a galactic conflict that no one really understands. These Jedi had no choice of who to be in their lives, and as Anakin stared down at the children, he was forced to ask himself a question that he'd been avoiding. What kind of galaxy does he want for his own children to grow up in? If he goes and saves Palpatine, a Sith Lord, the Jedi may fall. These children, along with his own, will be seen as enemies to the galaxy. Anakin had to close his eyes, and one of the children, a younger human girl, grabbed Anakin's hand, saying she was afraid until she saw him. Anakin knew the tales told around the Republic. He was known as the hero without fear, for his many acts of bravery in this war, but no one knew the truth. No one knew he was about to break. And once more, Anakin allowed himself to follow the thought of him going to save Palpatine. He knew it would result in the death or the arrest of Windu and the others. The Jedi would be painted as treasonous, and every Jedi, including the ones looking up to him right now as a hero, as their greatest hope and inspiration, would be in grave danger. For the first time, perhaps ever, Anakin was truly understanding what it meant to be a Jedi Master. And as he turned to look out of the window, staring across the city towards the executive building, he could hear the voice of Sidious calling out to him. Sidious yelled to Anakin that he must choose, and only he can save the one that he loves. Anakin remembered Yoda's words in the temple, words that felt so hollow and out of touch at the time, as Yoda told Anakin to let go of everything that he fears to lose. The words of the Jedi and the Sith battled in Anakin's mind, and finally, he decided to trust the Jedi. Anakin looked around to the children, and in the Force, he could feel their fear shifting to hope and to peace. And again, Anakin understood this was being a Jedi. He would leave Padme's fate up to the Force, and it was the hardest decision he's ever had to make. And across the city, in her apartment, Padme would actually feel a wave of peacefulness wash over her. It were as if she were connected to Anakin, feeling his fear, his anxieties, his frustrations. And in this moment, as Anakin finally learned to let go, she felt it, and she smiled to herself, looking down to her belly, where she and Anakin's child waited. And further in the city, in the Republic Executive Building, tendrils of blue lightning sprayed out of the broken window. Across the office hallway, the bodies of Aegon Kolar and Saesee Tiin lay dead, slain by the red blade of Darth Sidious. And in this main room, the body of Kit Fisto lay burned and beaten against the far wall. He'd survived much longer than the other Jedi, but it was now just Windu against Sidious. Sidious lost his lightsaber, but as Windu tried to push the Dark Lord into the corner, Sidious had felt Anakin's shift in the Force. He felt Anakin do the one thing Sidious never expected. Anakin was able to let go. And this gave Sidious fear that he hadn't felt ever. Sidious turned this fear into anger, finding his footing next to the window, standing tall as he sprayed powerful lightning into the purple blade of Mace Windu. The Jedi Master could feel his feet sliding backwards as he held up his saber, deflecting the lightning back towards the Sith Lord. And despite the lightning pouring right back into Sidious, his face and body becoming mangled, devoid of any color, the Dark Lord was only getting stronger. Mace could feel himself losing. He could feel the anger, the hatred, the fear, all of it being used to give Sidious enough power to do whatever he wanted. And then, Windu's lightsaber was ripped from his hands, falling into the Coruscant night out of the window. So, Mace Windu gave himself to the Force. He stood tall, hands up, to hold back the lightning. It was now scorching his hands, but Windu didn't feel the pain anymore. All he felt was the Force. And in the blinding currents of Sidious's rage, Windu reached out through the torrent, not with his hands or with power, but with a purpose. He sought the web of Sidious's weaknesses, trying desperately to find those invisible threads of fate and consequence that bound all things, the Shatterpoints of this battle, the weaknesses shaping destiny. Usually, Windu could see them everywhere. This was perhaps his greatest gift. Windu could see Shatterpoints in every decision, in everyone's mind, in the battlefield itself. If he were standing face to face with an enemy soldier, the Force may show him 20 specific ways to defeat him with one move. But here, now, in this final battle of light and dark, there was only one that Windu could see. Not in Sidious's body, not his throat, his twisted hands, not even in Sidious's lightning. It was in Windu himself. Windu realized, through the searing agony and the burning flesh, that the only true Shatterpoint left was within. The breaking point was the balance inside of him, the fine line he'd been walking for years. Vapad had always flirted with chaos, feeding on darkness, redirecting it, never falling to the darkness. But now, at the edge of death, Mace understood what it meant to fully open that door. He drew in a breath through the Force. He found rage for the way he failed to see the Sith controlling the Jedi and the Republic. He found resolve for the Order, and for Anakin doing what was necessary to win. Pain for the billions of affected people from this long, meaningless war, and peace for how this war would end. Mace called upon the shadows within and around him, the swirling chaos of this combat, the power of every battle that made him who he was. And Windu knew he would never see the sunrise on a peaceful galaxy that he'd given everything for. But as long as that sunrise would come, and the Sith were gone, he would do what he must. So, lightning burst from Windu's fingertips. It wasn't cold or hateful like Sidious's. It was blinding yellow, a pure release of power that Windu have heard of through Plo Koon once. They called it electric judgment. The two currents of lightning collided mid-air in a storm of electric power. Windu's lightning cracked with a sharp, chaotic rhythm, bending and flowing like the strikes of Vapad itself. Sidious's lightning writhed in response, desperate, angry, unstable. Their tendrils were locked, twisted, and they began to pulse with expanding pressure, feeding off of each other. The room darkened as the energy sucked light from every corner. Glass statues were cracking, furniture flying into the walls, sparks of yellow and blue spraying around them. Windu stood firm. Body was breaking, but his mind was still. He saw the end clearly, and he welcomed it. He'd done what he came to do. No more battles, no more war. He felt the Force surround him as a friend welcoming him home, and Sidious in that same instant realized he'd lost control. His face twisted with terror. The darkness no longer obeyed him. It was recoiling, surging, turning wild against him. The Shatterpoint had found him. His victory was gone, unraveled by the one Jedi he could never bend. He tried to pull back, to sever this stream, but it was too late. The two streams of lightning caused a huge reaction, and an explosion tore through the Chancellor's office like a wave of fire. Light consumed everything. Glass vaporized, walls buckled, and then just silence. When it was over, there was nothing left of the duel, No trace of Sith or Jedi, just a scorched room where it all ended. In moments, alarms would blare, emergency fire and rescue teams were alerted of the explosion. Chaos would ensue. And in the Jedi Temple, as Anakin distracted himself by telling these younglings the story of how Master Qui-Gon Jinn found him and how he won the pod race, as the only human to ever do it, the younglings all gathered around him in awe, and Anakin felt the explosion through the Force. He felt the dying breath of Mace Windu, almost like a whisper to Anakin to say that he was proud of him. He felt the pathetic desperation of Sidious die out, and Anakin felt peace. Peace for himself, for Padme, the Jedi, the galaxy. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. From here, Terra Sinube would enter the council chambers, thanking Anakin for watching over the children while he helped lock down the temple. Anakin smiled to the older master, telling him the temple will be safe, and he said goodbye to the children for now before hurrying down to a speeder and flying right over to Padme's apartment. When he arrived, Padme was in a hurried panic after finding out about the explosion in Palpatine's office. She, and many others, thought this was a separatist bomb or assassination, and the Republic needed to act swiftly. But when Anakin arrived, he just scooped her up in his arms, hugging her like they'd been apart for years. Anakin had a huge smile on his face as he said it's over. Sidious is gone, and with him, he can no longer feel the nightmares. The fear that came with the Sith had been feeding into Anakin's mind, showing him the worst future, and now Anakin only felt hope. Padme didn't understand what was going on, so Anakin sat her down and explained everything. Palpatine, Sidious, Dooku, Separatists, Sith, Jedi, everything Padme needed to know in order to help the Republic stabilize after the war was calmly told to her. So, she would learn everything, and she would tell a council of senators, including Bail Organa and Mon Mothma. This Senate Council would speak to the entire Republic government, and although it would take many days, with Grievous dead and the Separatist Council soon arrested, the war could indeed come to an end. The Jedi Council, including Obi-Wan Kenobi after his victory on Utapau, would begin to return to Coruscant. Ahsoka Tano, with Maul in custody, would return as well. Maul would be frozen in carbonite to ensure there would be no escape this time. As for the Jedi who fought and died in the office of Sidious, a grand funeral would be held in the Jedi Temple. Everyone was here to honor the lives of 4 Jedi Council members in Sazitin, Aegon Kolar, Kit Fisto, and Mace Windu. Anakin looked on in peace, and his mind drifted momentarily to a reality where the younglings never showed up to be with him in the council chambers. And today, at this funeral, Anakin stood among these younglings, helping them to see that death is a natural part of life, allowing them to celebrate the lives of the Jedi while still feeling down about what happened to them. Padme watched Anakin interacting with the children, and Obi-Wan remarked that he's never had the patience for children like him. Training Anakin may have taken that from him, he said with a laugh. The banquet after the funeral was lovely, and Grandmaster Yoda would announce that the war was over and he would be stepping down as Grand Master. His replacement would be Master Plo Koon. The Jedi honored this choice, and the clone troopers here for the banquet cheered very loudly for Master Plo. Some days later, the stress of returning the Republic into peace without war would indeed rush Padme into labor. Anakin had convinced himself that he was ready to let go and trust the Force. Whatever happens, he would accept. Of course, when the time came, and Padme was indeed giving birth to twins, Anakin was anything but calm. The nightmares were gone, but he could still remember them, and so, this process was rather agonizing. He couldn't lose her, but of course, with Padme being in the greatest medical facility Coruscant had to offer, she and the children would be just fine. Luke and Leia were born, and they would go with Padme and Anakin back to Naboo, as the Jedi would finally learn the truth about Anakin being a father. It wouldn't exactly be accepted right away, but Anakin took time away from the Order to let them think on it, if he was still allowed to be a Jedi when he eventually returns. In the months that Anakin and Padme were away, conflict would rise from the shadows. Just before the war ended, Maul had sent many crime syndicates that he was in control of into hiding until the time was right, and soon Crimson Dawn, the Black Sun, the Pikes, and the others would realize Maul was not coming back, and so they began to rise up in the Outer Rim without Maul. These syndicates figured things would just return to how they were before the war, with the Outer Rim just sort of being its own realm of chaos and crime. And these syndicates were still united as a shadow collective, not under Maul, but under Dryden Voss. They quietly and quickly seized shipping lanes, ports, vulnerable systems, spreading terror through spice running, slaving, and violence. Planets like Obadiah and Nal Hutta quickly fell under their control. But the Jedi had changed after the war. Now led by Grandmaster Plo Koon, they were much more free from Senate oversight, and they moved fast to stop the spread of this shadow collective. They would establish outposts across the Outer Rim, fighting as guardians rather than generals. Their first major strike would come on Florum, where Ahsoka Tano and Obi-Wan Kenobi led an operation with Rex and Cody leading their clone units. The Shadow Collective had turned old pirate bases into slave camps and weapons depots. Jedi-led ground forces descended through jungle canopies, clearing out the area. Ahsoka cut through defenses with speed and grace, and Obi-Wan held the front line with his excellent defense. Cody's forces blasted through supply paths as Rex led a flanking maneuver. The final assault would come on a fortified bunker, ending with the Collective suffering a huge loss and hundreds of people freed. Weeks later, on Mustafar, Plo Koon and Depa Billaba would lead a strike on a volcanic fortress that now served as a major hub for Voss's operations. The Bad Batch and Commander Wolffe were helping to lead this all, and they attacked during an ion storm, disabling sensors and shields. Hunter guided forces through lava canyons, while Wrecker and Tech took down power relays. Inside, Depa fought through the inner defenses, while Plo was freeing prisoners in the refinery levels. The Jedi would uncover command data before leveling the fortress with coordinated artillery fire from above. With key bases destroyed and the network in disarray, the Shadow Collective would collapse over the next few months. The Jedi were peacekeepers, and they left behind a plethora of resources for the people in need across these planets affected by the syndicates. Voss and the others would fall, either to the Jedi or to infighting, as no one had the respect that Maul carried, and the Jedi would be hailed as heroes to the people once more. Word of this would spread to Naboo, and Anakin would be extremely proud of the Order for becoming what he always thought they would be. And as Anakin and Padme spent more time on Naboo, living on the planet, truly seeing it, being ones with it, they saw that Naboo needed help economically and with morale after Palpatine. So, Anakin took on a rather large project in his rare free time. In the plains of Naboo, Anakin would work to use funding from the plasma refinery that was going into the pockets of wealthy people on Coruscant, and he convinced the people of Naboo to help him reroute it into something else. He created a pod racing track through the plains and the hills that would bring great economic prosperity here. It would be far more safe and regulated than the one on Tatooine, and it would take years to build. Anakin stayed away from the Jedi for now, focusing on Padme, the children, and revitalizing this planet that the Skywalker family now called home. The track, called the Skywalking Pod Race Track, would soon be built, and the first ever race would be hosting many well-known names from around the galaxy. Among them were Bob Quadraneros, Dudbolt, Mahonic, even Sebulba was here, and of course, Anakin Skywalker himself would enter. He was one of two humans. The other was a younger man who went by the name of Han, an excellent pilot. Han had come to Naboo, found a gambling man named Lando Calrissian, and Han had bet that if he wins the race, he gets Lando's ship. If he loses, Lando gets all of the credits to Han's name. Lando took the bet, not thinking a human could actually win again, and when the first race ended, after flying through the hills, rivers, and valleys of Naboo, Anakin, Luke, Leia, and Padme would watch Han blast off in the Millennium Falcon, making Anakin now one of only two humans to ever win a pod race. As the years went by, peace was maintained by the Jedi and the Republic working together, but not tied together. There was more of a loose agreement to help each other, while the Jedi maintained much more autonomy than before. When Luke and Leia were around 8 years old, Anakin would take them to the Jedi Temple, as Padme would re-enter into politics to help Chancellor Mon Mothma with the New Republic. Anakin would oversee Luke and Leia entering the Order, and their training would begin as Anakin took on a role of a youngling trainer. He was an instructor and a hero to so many of these children. The years would fly by, and the children would train with Anakin under the newly built statue of Mace Windu. And folks, that is our story for today. One I enjoyed a lot, and one that's, interesting, or not, I don't know, it's hard to describe, because, the action kind of takes place in the first half, whereas usually with my stories, I try to spread the action throughout, or at least in the second half, specifically with Sidious, but, I debated different ways to go about this. I debated one story where, Anakin is with the Younglings in the Council Chambers, and Sidious actually beats Windu and executes Order 66. We go on a journey with Anakin and the Younglings, but ultimately I decided, I think I've done that a couple times before, and I wanted to write out a different sort of fight scene with Windu and Sidious, where we just explore a different way of that being more fun. You know, a little Jedi lightning. That was very fun to write. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it maybe stretches the bounds of what's canon and what's not, but let's have some fun, you know, why not? So I really enjoyed that part a lot. Just fun to rewrite that. And of course, maybe my highlight of this, writing some pod racing stuff. Again, I mean, you may have seen from my last video, I enjoy writing a little Han Solo into the action, so having him show up and win a pod race, you know, who would have saw that coming from the title? So appreciate you guys. As always, let me know what you want to see next. I always, you know, the top comments, I always see the most. I see a lot of them, but definitely those. I promise not to spell anything wrong in the title this time, even though I do a lot. Not really, I don't know. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.